Freddie Mercury stands at the edge of the stage, the blinding lights hitting his face as a sea of 60,000 fans roar his name. But then something unexpected happens. He slows down, scans the endless ocean of faces, and in one sudden, deliberate motion, he points directly at one person in the crowd. And in that instant, the energy of the entire concert shifts. Because for a few seconds, the spotlight is no longer on Queen's legendary frontman. It is on this single fan. And as silence falls between beats of music, everyone in the stadium can feel that something extraordinary is about to happen. Yet nobody, not even the band behind him, is ready for the wave of raw emotion that follows. And here's the thing, Queen concerts were always emotional. They were loud, passionate, unforgettable experiences, but this moment was different. This was the kind of moment that becomes burned into history. The kind of gesture that is replayed in documentaries and whispered about by fans decades later. And I want you to picture it clearly. Freddie in his white tank top, microphone in hand, sweat dripping under the stage lights, his eyes piercing through the massive crowd. And yet somehow he manages to find one person, one tiny face in a massive human ocean. And when he does, he doesn't just point casually like a rock star hyping the crowd. No, he points with intention, as if to say, I see you, and you matter. And it's here that the magic of Freddie Mercury truly comes alive, because in that very second, the atmosphere shifts from a high-energy rock show into something deeply personal, deeply human, and the entire stadium feels it ripple across them like a silent wave. People stop singing for a moment, some gasp, some reach for their friends, and then, when the fan reacts, when their face is caught in the spotlight, the entire crowd suddenly feels like they're witnessing something far greater than just music. And this is why the story you're about to hear is so powerful, because what happened next left thousands in tears, hardened rock fans crying openly, strangers hugging strangers, voices breaking as they sang louder than ever before. And the truth is, none of them knew they were about to be part of one of the most emotional and unforgettable moments in live music history. So if you've ever wondered what makes Freddie Mercury not just one of the greatest performers, but one of the greatest connectors of human emotion, stay with me, because once you understand what happened that night, you'll never look at a live concert the same way again. It was 1986, the peak of Queen's legendary Magic Tour, and Wembley Stadium in London was packed with more than 60,000 fans who had traveled from all over the world just to see Freddie Mercury and his bandmates perform, the air vibrating with chants, flags waving, and a restless energy that only grows as the sun sets and the stage lights blaze to life. And you have to understand something. This wasn't just another rock concert. This was history in the making, because Queen were at the very height of their fame, riding the wave of their Live Aid triumph the year before, their albums topping charts, and their reputation as one of the greatest live bands already cemented. Yet in the background, away from the spotlight, Freddie himself was entering a stage of life that made these shows even more meaningful. Because although he had not publicly announced anything yet, close friends and those around him knew his health was becoming fragile. And every performance started to carry in unspoken urgency, a sense that he was giving everything he had to every song because he didn't know how long he could keep doing it. And if you stood in that stadium on that summer night, you would have felt it too. The vibrations of Brian May's guitar echoing through the stands, the pounding of Roger Taylor's drums rattling your chest. And then there was Freddie strutting across the stage with that unmatched presence, commanding the entire crowd with just a wave of his hand or a raised eyebrow. It's important to note that Queen concerts weren't like other shows where you just watch the band. They were shared experiences. Freddie didn't just sing to people. He sang with them, turning tens of thousands of voices into a single choir. And this concert at Wembley embodied that better than any other, the sound of 60,000 voices roaring radio GAGA, with hands clapping in perfect unison, still sends shivers down the spine of anyone who's seen the footage. And yet despite the size, despite the magnitude of the event, Freddie always managed to make the biggest stage in the world feel intimate, like he was performing in your living room. And this is exactly the context you need to understand before the moment we're talking about, because when he pointed to that one fan, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a performer who had made connection the core of his art, who could turn a football stadium into a family gathering, And when that hand gesture finally happened, it wasn't just a random movement on stage. It was the climax of a night where everyone already felt they were part of something much larger than themselves, which is why the reaction hit so hard when it did. As the night carried on and Queen moved through their powerful set list, the energy inside Wembley reached a fever pitch, song after song fueling the crowd's fire. But then the atmosphere shifted when Freddie sat down at the piano, and the band prepared to play one of their most emotional songs, Love of My Life. A piece that had always been special because Freddie often turned the microphone toward the audience and let them sing the lyrics back to him, creating this magical dialogue between artist and fan. And on this night, the tradition continued. Only it carried an even heavier weight because the song itself is about loss, devotion, and connection. And in a way, it felt like Freddie was offering his own heart to the people in front of him. So imagine this. The booming guitars and drums quiet down, the spotlight tightens on Freddie, and the entire stadium hushes in anticipation. And then, as he begins to sing the first verse, his eyes move across the crowd, scanning slowly, deliberately, almost like he's searching for something or someone. And here's where his brilliance as a performer shines, because he doesn't just sing, he studies the faces, he listens to the energy, he lets the crowd's voices feed into his. And then it happens, in the middle of this sweeping chorus of 60,000 people singing back to him, Freddie suddenly stops pointing the microphone outward and instead raises his finger high, stretching his arm toward the crowd, and locks onto a single face, freezing the entire stadium in that instant. And this is important because Freddie Mercury never did anything halfway. Every move was intentional. Every gesture was theatrical, but rooted in truth. And so, when he pointed, it wasn't just some random wave to hype the audience. It was sharp, direct, and intimate, almost as if the thousands of other people disappeared for a moment, and all that mattered was this one connection. And the effect was immediate. A ripple of silence moved through the crowd. People close enough to notice the gesture gasped. Others raised their hands, hoping he might mean them. But those near the pointed fan understood exactly who it was meant for, and suddenly the performance transformed, because what was once a communal sing-along became a spotlight moment between Freddie Mercury and one individual. And it is here that the emotional core of the night began to crystallize, because fans weren't just watching a concert anymore. They were witnessing something rare, the breaking down of the wall between star and spectator. And whether you were in the front row or the furthest seat in the back, you felt the intensity of that gesture, you felt the shift, and you knew something unforgettable was about to happen, even before the reaction fully unfolded. When Freddie's fingers stretched out and landed on that one fan, the cameras and the people around her caught it instantly, and the look on her face was something nobody could ever forget, because she wasn't just smiling like someone who got noticed by their idol. She was trembling, her eyes already wet with tears, her hand pressed against her chest, as if to hold her heart in place. And you could almost feel the entire weight of the moment crash into her all at once, because imagine being in a sea of 60,000 strangers, every single one screaming, singing, waving, and yet somehow the most charismatic frontman in rock history picks you, locks eyes with you, and lets the entire stadium know that in this moment you're the one who matters. And what makes it even more powerful is that this particular fan wasn't just another concert goer out for a good time, as stories from those who attended later revealed. She had been battling illness, and people around her knew she was going through the kind of struggle that mirrored Freddie's own hidden battle at the time, which makes the moment almost poetic, because it was like two lives intersecting through music, two souls connected by pain and resilience. And when she broke down, clutching her face and singing the words back to him through her tears, the crowd around her followed suit. Strangers who didn't know her reaching out to comfort her. People crying simply because they couldn't help but feel the rawness of what they were witnessing. And here's the thing. Normally at concerts you might see fans screaming or fainting or waving signs to get attention. But this was different. This was quiet, heavy, unspoken, the kind of connection that didn't need words or theatrics. It was human to human, artist to fan. And for those standing nearby, it was almost too much to process, because how often do you get to see your hero, someone untouchable and larger than life, strip all of that away with one small gesture and acknowledge the pain and love of a single person. And that's why, even as the song carried on, the emotion lingered in the air, people crying without even knowing her name, people feeling their own personal struggles reflected in hers, because Freddie Mercury had taken one person's vulnerability and magnified it to the size of a stadium, making every single person present feel like they were part of that connection. And it is in this very moment that the fans' reaction transformed the concert. From a performance into something sacred, something spiritual, something that everyone who was there would carry with them for the rest of their lives. What happened next is what turned that single gesture into one of the most unforgettable moments in live music history. Because as soon as Freddie pointed and the fan broke down in tears, the emotion didn't stay contained to that small circle of people around her. It spread like a wave rolling through the stadium. And you could see in real time, first the fans near her started crying too, reaching out to hug each other. Then whole sections of the crowd began lifting their arms, swaying, singing louder. And before long, the entire 60,000 people inside Wembley were united in this overwhelming surge of emotion. And psychologists have a name for this. They call it emotional contagion, the way one person's feelings can ripple out and be mirrored by everyone around them. And it's magnified in large groups where energy bounces back and forth like an echo. And that's exactly what happened here. Because Freddie's small, intimate gesture created a domino effect, one tear leading to another, one person's voice breaking, inspiring the person next to them to sing even louder, until the sound of the crowd was almost drowning out the band itself. And if you've ever been in a stadium during a historic moment, you know that electricity, that goosebump sensation where thousands of people seem to be breathing in sync. And in this case, the connection was so strong that even people who weren't directly watching the fans still felt the power of it. They didn't need to see her face to understand the weight of what Freddie had done, because the sound of her crying, the energy of those around her, and the sight of Freddie still gazing in her direction told the whole story. And the fascinating part is that this wasn't hype energy like a sports event or a typical rock anthem. It was quieter, deeper, almost spiritual, people holding each other. Friends who had come to the show together, suddenly finding themselves hugging, strangers putting their arms around strangers, and the collective singing grew not just louder, but more heartfelt, voices cracking, words shouted through tears. And for a performer like Freddie Mercury, this was exactly the magic he lived for, because he had the rare ability to not only entertain, but to unify, to make people forget their separations, their problems, and to create one single heartbeat inside a crowd of thousands. And that's why, even decades later, people who were there still describe it as one of the most emotional communal experiences of their lives, because it was no longer about a band playing a song. It was about humanity itself, about shared vulnerability, and about the way music can turn individual pain into collective healing in a single breathtaking moment. The reason this single moment with Freddie Mercury pointing at one fan mattered so much goes far beyond stage theatrics or concert magic, because at its core it revealed who Freddie truly was beneath the glitter, the costumes, and the larger-than-life persona. It showed that behind the rock god, there was a man who felt deeply and who understood the silent battles people were fighting. And that's what made the gesture so powerful, because he wasn't just acknowledging a random face in the crowd. He was recognizing another human being in pain at a time, when he himself was living with an invisible struggle. And though Freddie had not gone public with his diagnosis, those close to him later admitted that he was already feeling the weight of his illness, which makes the moment almost prophetic. Two lives colliding in shared suffering without a single word spoken. And this is exactly why it left the crowd in tears, because people subconsciously picked up on the rawness. They sensed that Freddie wasn't just performing, but communicating something honest, something intimate. And when you step back and think about it, this is the genius of Freddie Mercury. He could transform the biggest stadium in the world into a place where every single fan felt like he was singing only to them. And this gesture of pointing to one fan condensed that superpower into a single second, showing that one person's existence mattered. And by extension, that everyone's existence mattered, which is why thousands of people who had nothing to do with that fan still cried, as if it had been them. And it's important to note that music historians and psychologists often talk about parasocial relationships, the idea that fans feel deeply connected to performers even without knowing them personally. But Freddie reversed that. He made the performative fan connection just as real as if he knew their souls. And that's why people still describe him not only as one of the greatest singers, but one of the greatest connectors of human emotion, because he didn't just give people a show, he gave them meaning. And so, when you think about this one moment of Freddie Mercury pointing to a fan and creating an emotional earthquake across 60,000 people, you realize it mattered because it wasn't really about rock and roll at all. It was about life, about love, about being seen when you feel invisible, and about how one simple act of recognition can echo forever in the hearts of those who witness it.